Good morning, evening, nighttime, dusk, dawn, wherever you might be and whenever you might be listening to the podcast. I'm your host, Bear Light. Today on the show, it's a great one. We've got CATJEANS, both of G1 and women's carball, here to discuss a little bit about the future of women's carball, a little bit about the history as well, about what's going on in that front. And then John McDermott of Ole Miss Esports is here to talk with us as well. He's got a lot to say about the topic of collegiate esports, professional esports, and how they might mingle and how they might differ. It's a show that you don't want to miss. All right, architects, we may have one of the most exciting interviews that we've had on the podcast thus far. CATJEANS here today, and she is the Director of Player Operations for Gamers First, and also the Director of Operations of Women's Carball. CATJEANS, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Of course, it's our pleasure, and so we want to kind of get right into it. Let's dive in, talk about women's carball. I mean, it's exciting that things are back in action. And so I kind of wanted to hear your thoughts first before we get into WCB. And let's chat about the roots of women in the RL community. What did that landscape look like prior to women's carball being established?
It's a really good question. Women's carball was established, I think it was around 2020. And prior to that, there weren't really many opportunities for women in the scene. There were tournaments that, like one-off tournaments that streamers, content creators would have for women, but a lot of the times there wasn't any type of verification process. So people who weren't women would kind of come in and troll them or just take the prize pool, and that was really bad. So the creation of women's carball was a really, really important step towards getting a safe community for women in Rocket League.
100%. And since the get-go, I think they've done a great job. Obviously, you'll have your one-off situations, but, even at the beginning, when it was known as WCBC, I feel like, if that situation arised, they were definitely located and called out. So it's always, in my opinion, they've done a really, really good job with hunting that down should it happen, and being able to handle the situation accordingly. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely agree with that. And I've never had an issue as far as that with women's carball personally, or no one that I know has. It's pretty tight system.
Awesome stuff. Well, let's talk about the beginning, right? The roots of women's carball as well. Season 1 launched in January of 2020 under a tournament organizer and esports organization called the Crimson Wings, referred to at the time as WCBC, or Women's Carball Championships. The event featured a $1,000 prize pool, and you were actually competing on a team at the time called Extreme Zone. Y'all didn't do too hot, but listen, it was your first experience there in the WCBC. So let's talk a little bit about your experience there.
Yeah. I'll go ahead and expose myself. I'm not sure that we took even one match of any of the 7 series we played. I'm not sure that we took even one. One of my teammates was from the west side of Canada, and my other teammate was from maybe I think it was, like, Denmark.
Nice.
Um, so we had quite the range of pings and availabilities to start. Um, and, I had joined women's carball, just really wanting to try to compete. I was probably, like, gold at the time. And these 2 girls were like, "Yeah, we were looking for a teammate," because everything was mixed region at that point. There were really not many participants total, so they're like, "Yeah, we're from different spots of the world, and we need a third." And I'm like, "Oh, bet. Here I come."
So you could
So,
you could
yeah.
absolutely blame it on the ping then.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, if we all were on the same ping, clearly we would've gotten first. There's no doubt about that. Um, but it was a really fun experience because it was my first time actually competing, and, I knew my teammates wouldn't be toxic. I knew they weren't gonna flame me. And even though we were some hot, not good, um, we had a really fun time during that first season.
I think that's what matters for sure. Definitely, you'll have some growth along the way, of course. And in fact, obviously not winning a game, a pain point, if you will. Um, But let's talk specific to the organization itself in WCBC because you were involved at it in the time at the time, right? So you were playing and competing in it. What were the things that you were witnessing that they were kind of learning along the way that helped them grow?
What I really did like about it is that the leadership at the time, were super inclusive of the community when it came to making decisions around the org about if there's a certain sponsor that wanted to get picked like, wanted to sponsor women's carball, they would consult the captains of teams and be like, "Are you comfortable with this kind of sponsor? Is this a sponsor that you'd like to see?" And just super, super, inclusive of the community when making decisions like that because it really, at that point, was kind of, like, extremely grassroots, like, pickup league situation, and, now, obviously, we've grown so, so much, and we still include our community in everything that we can, but back in the day, it was like it was very, very tight-knit, and it was a really cool thing to watch grow.
Definitely, and come a long way for sure. I would argue, and so a large amount of the Rocket League community they know what has happened to women's carball, and so I don't really want to get into that side of it because I know a lot of places have covered it. But a big shout out to the crews of First Touch for having you on. I saw Chalk Cast as well was chatting about the situation and really shining a light on the situation to help better the situation or in an attempt to do so. So I'd rather kind of stick away from that because if you haven't seen that or if you don't know what I'm talking about, I will actually link those videos in the description so you can check those out. But I'd like to cover the future of women's carball instead, and so okay, there's a lot to be excited about. I mean, with G1 officially announcing the acquisition of women's carball on February 24th, there was a tweet that went out and it was linked to a Forbes article, which is one of the biggest most recognized global media outlets in the world today. So that's a pretty incredible way to make the announcement.
Yeah, gotta come out hot. That's the G1 way. Yeah, so Kenny Vaccaro, CEO of G1, decided to pick up, women's carball. He could see that, we were a league that just really, really wanted to succeed and have these opportunities, and, G1 and Kenny has a lot of, heart and soul for marginalized communities in gaming, so women's carball was just kind of like a perfect opportunity for them to provide some help and get us back in action, and, I could not be more grateful because I already worked for both of them, and now I'm under the same roof, which is pretty cool.
Sure.
So, pretty convenient on my end. And, yeah, so far so good. We've already, resumed our March regional, so it's been really good so far.
Amping back up. We've seen that for sure. So in that Forbes article as well, it mentioned that the G1 team it's a quote, committing to expanding the league's operations to include a player development program, a player profile content series, in a LAN and championship event. So are you able to share any of the details on this currently?
Yeah, so as it was just announced yesterday, G1 is having a really amazing booth at the San Diego Major, which will feature signed NFL players Quandre Diggs and Darius Slay and Kenny Vaccaro. And one of the
Wow.
best parts of that booth is that we'll have a dedicated women's carball section where you can meet and greet with your favorite players and talent, and they'll have dedicated time slots which they will announce on their own socials. So that's going to be the first piece of our highlight series is an in-person activation at our G1 booth.
That is so sick. Love hearing that. And so that announcement just happened yesterday as well. So super exciting news. I thought I would try to, grab some more information for it for sure. But all right, let's talk more about the acquisition of G1 coming into the picture here for women's carball because I know you're obviously involved prior to that time. So take us back to that moment. What were some of the feelings, the thoughts, the moments that you can remember? When this was taking place and when G1 really started to bring this into reality.
I definitely think my reaction and experience was different from most of the staff because I already did work for G1. So, a lot of the staff, it's hard when you get kind of burned.
Oh yeah.
You go in skeptical, but me personally, when it happened, I just was full of hope. full of just excitement for the future because I know that G1's gonna take care of women's carball, and I think they're the best org to do it. And, really when it happened, I was just elated because it was a long time of just questioning and not knowing what was gonna happen next, and is women's carball gonna die? So, really was just relief.
For sure, because those thoughts you can't help but kind of have them creep in a little bit, especially on the staff that had been burned, like you mentioned. So, I think that's super important to kind of note as well. That that's a very real feeling coming in, but obviously the personal gain for you was that you get to have it all under one roof, like you mentioned earlier in the podcast. But let's talk a little bit about the leadership too and what that brings. So some of the positives for the entire staff of G1 coming in. What I feel like it's super important. Talk about how important it is to have authentic support, specifically for leaders that are willing and able to take on such a tall task and really encourage inclusivity.
Yeah, and that's a really big point because like I mentioned earlier, Kenny and G1 has already done a whole lot for marginalized groups, not only in gaming, but just in general. So knowing that the leadership team that picked us up is walking the walk and not just talking the talk, it's that's the reason why I was so relieved and happy that G1 picked this up because you see a lot of orgs or org leaders saying on social media like we support women or we support whatever XYZ group, but you can say that all day and
Yeah.
it's what your actions speak louder than your words. And unfortunately, a lot of the times, a lot of it's just empty promises and virtue signaling on social media, and that's like a pet peeve of mine. So
Mm.
it's really nice to be under the leadership that I already know has proven that they're dedicated to the cause that they say they are.
Yeah, it's unfortunate seeing a lot of, PR
Yeah.
attempts, what I'm saying, when it's not really backed by any actions. So I think you've hit it right on the head there for sure. As far as that goes. And even with, the March women's carball, you saw a lot of talk about the transgender and somehow pushback still happening against that. So I know that's something that you're really passionate about too, to ensure that, this is, transgender women are women 100% and that they deserve to be in this league and play in this league. And why is there still questions happening today?
That's a really good question because a lot of this has happened following the Rocket League, Radiant, Ally Bank
Hmm.
women's tournament.
That's right.
And it's just extremely frustrating because everyone that I've seen hating on Twitter and sending messages that are transphobic and hateful, none of them have come from the cis women that play in these tournaments. I don't know
Yeah.
any cisgendered women who have a problem playing alongside transgender women because we're all women. So it's another one of those things. Please stop speaking on behalf of women and let us talk. And if we tell you that we're okay with it and there's no problem whatsoever, then that's the end of the story.
That's what matters most. You absolutely nailed it. So, all right. So the first week is in the books for WCB under Gamers First. So what are you looking forward to? In the remainder of this season.
I'm really, really looking forward to honestly, to me, I think women's Carball has some of the craziest roster mania that you could follow. A lot of people don't know that our rosters, like aside from the top 3 or 4 in every region, they're constantly changing because it's not like RLCS where there's, a million teams that are playing. So there's like it's hard to find the perfect match of 3 women that play perfectly together and have the chemistry. So I really like following the roster changes. As of recently, like the number 4 team in North America, like Angry Pollos, they just disbanded the other day, and everyone's like, "What's gonna happen next?" Because they were number 4 in NA. So that's a really interesting thing to follow. But aside from following all the roster moves and teams, I think just seeing, the support and things we can get from G1 for the remainder of the season is gonna be really exciting, and I know that this season really is gonna be focused on healing from, past burns and getting everyone paid back. G1 is paying everyone back that worked, talent staff and prize pools.
Wow.
It was not their burden to bear, it was not their debt to be paid, but they're making sure that these people who spent time and effort and money are getting what they worked hard for. So it's really just kind of the motto of the rest of the season for me is just healing and getting back to a place where everyone feels happy and comfortable.
For those of you who didn't know what, CATJEANS was talking about when she was talking about taking action, right? That's the perfect example, right? G1 didn't have to do that. So to do that is just incredible and shows that authenticity that we were talking about previously. And so obviously gamers first, right? They're a big organization within esports, and they'll actually be at the RLCS Winter Major here coming up in San Diego too, which we'll get into in just a second. But big organizations in esports, Gen G involved with women's carball, Misfits, Luminosity, Williams Resolved, Endpoint. These are big names, not just in Rocket League esports, but in esports in general. And so, obviously, in a world where some of these esports organizations are unfortunately either shutting their doors or having big, bounce backs or cutbacks, rather, what would you say to an organization that might be on the fence about allocating some of their funds towards women in gaming, specifically for the WCB?
Great question, and I want to recognize that the percentage of women total as compared to the percentage of gamers in the world is much higher than people expect. I think that we've gotten up to almost 50% of gamers are women, and simply put, if you want to engage the entire gaming community, then you need to create opportunities for the marginalized people in them. So joining a women's initiative is how you get that other 50% of gamers engaged in your org. And for women's carball specifically, since we're still kind of grassroots and building, I think now is a really great time to invest in a team. Because if you look at something like Valorant Game Changers, financially for an org picking up a team, not only is it two extra players because you have five on Valorant, but the going rates for picking up players in Valorant Game Changers is super crazy, just like it is for a lot of other esports players. But since women's carball is super green in comparison, and we're still, fighting for developer support, investing now would be a pretty smart idea on the org side, if you ask me.
I agree with you. So, of course, picking up a team is the way to directly get involved in not only that, but support the players within the scene and making it happen to the many women who are looking to advance their career in the game of Rocket League. But I mean, that's not the only way to support either. If there's any individual or organization who'd like to support women's carball in a different way, whether it be through donations, partnerships, working with event staff, things like that, what's the best way that they can get involved with you all?
If you're somebody who's looking to involve yourself in the partnerships or donation side, you could reach out to me directly and I'll connect you to the right people on the leadership team. As far as donations, since we've been repicked up by G1, I'm have some exciting events in the works. In December, we had a holiday randomonium event that I planned where it was a 2v2 tournament, but your teammate was actually random. And the way that we funded that was through crowdfunding for the prize pool. And I think we raised almost maybe over $200 in crowdfunding for that prize pool. And it was a really, really exciting event because it also got our women to play with each other that, not their normal teammates and find new people who might be fun to play with. So once we announce anything like that, if you wanna contribute to something like a prize pool, then that would be how that's done.
That's super exciting. The $200 from crowdfunding. Obviously, we'll see that number build, I feel like, and hopefully,
Mhm.
fingers crossed in the future. But it also speaks to my heart because randomanium, dad joke. So love that. So love that. Play on words, of course. But let's get into it. G1 at the Winter Majors. So they made some progress, and I know my boy Mark by 8 part of that squad too, and Dorito joins this squad as well for G1. So pretty exciting times for the G1 name.
Yeah, a full Spanish team, which is really, really exciting, and I know with our team, it's just been, like, a really, really cool opportunity, to talk with them and meet them and work with them, and, I've actually learned a lot more about Spanish culture than I ever would because they celebrate things different than we do. I learned a lot about New Year's celebrations, and it's been kind of cool to get the opportunity to learn about other parts of the world. And as far as qualifying for the San Diego major, like, honestly, not that we had any doubts, but it was a really hard run. And they had to play in a tiebreaker against 2 other teams, and they were maybe the bottom seed out of that, so we had to play both German Amigos and Quadrant to get to San Diego and beat them
Whew.
both after our bracket run. So that was like we were in Charlotte at the time for HCS, our Halo team was
Hey.
playing,
Yeah.
and we were watching Halo on the screen and had the Rocket League teams matches on our phones, and we're, like, screaming, but our Halo team is probably losing at that time,
Oh,
so
no.
it was the worst. But,
Oh,
yeah,
uh,
it's really it was a great opportunity. They've been boot camping in, the States since I think it was March 13th. They got out there for 3
wow.
weeks. Yeah, our headquarters is in Austin, so we got them out in Austin really early to really just, play together and have as much competitive experience against the NA teams that are gonna be here, as well as Sam, OCE, whoever else is boot camping early. So, yeah,
I
it's
did
really
see
exciting.
it is. I saw some content on the G1 Twitter, which is at G1 Official, if you want to go check that out. So saw them in the States boot camping. That just shows how much effort that they've put in for sure. And yeah, at HCS, hopefully your team didn't see you out there in your awesome G1 swag, by the way. I saw on
Yeah.
socials too.
Yeah, G1 goes crazy. Those white tracksuits that we were wearing were made by Legends. Shout out Legends. They
Mm.
had a really fast turnaround on those, and their quality is actually amazing. It's just I don't know. When it comes to esports gear, sometimes it cannot be made the best, but Legends, I think they do sports gear as well, so they just have like the best quality.
So go check out G1, of course, on Twitter. And of course, you have to support. If you haven't already, now's the time to do it. Go to Twitch, Twitter, and Instagram at Women's Carball and make sure you follow them there as well. We have Women's Carball April coming up. For Europe, it looks like close qualifiers here on the 8th of April, and the main event on the 9th. And then for North America, it is the 15th for close qualifiers and the 16th for the main event. Can we catch that on the Women's Carball official Twitch channel?
Yes, absolutely, you can. The closed qualifiers and main events are streamed. Sometimes for NA, there is an open qualifier, but that is usually on team stream, so you'll have to follow our Twitter to keep up and see where to watch those.
Awesome. CATJEANS, thank you so much for joining us. Your final shout outs and your socials where people can find you.
Yeah, I'm CatJeans on Twitter and Twitch. That's pretty much all that needs to be said on me. I would love to give a shout out to WCB CEO, mentor, and best friend Rebecca Longoa. She has been an amazing force in getting women's carball to where it needs to be. She's the best. I think on Twitter she's at R Longoa, which is LONGAWA, and she is just the most amazing woman. And I really, really appreciate all her hard work with women's carball, and of course Kenny Vaccaro and LJ Brown from G1, both 2 very important individuals on making this thing work. So, shout out to all of them, and of course, women's carball teams, content creators and talent, production team, match admins, all of you are so appreciated. And yeah, much appreciated to all the friends making this happen.
Wonderful. Well, CATJEANS, I'll include those links in the description as well. So go and check them out too, per that shout out. CATJEANS, thank you so much for joining me on the Esports Architects podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I have one last shout out to my friend
Go for it.
Bearlight for having me on.
I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful to meet you at HCS, and I thank you for the opportunity to come and chat. It's been awesome.
Oh, it's 100% my pleasure for sure. So good meeting you as well and hope to have you on in the future. Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Awesome. Thank you so much again for joining. All right, architects, with me now is John McDermott, the director of esports at Ole Miss. John, welcome to the podcast.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for having me. It's it's a great experience, and I love working with you guys. So Thank you so much for having me out here. It's like one of the first like warm days here at in Oxford that we've
Nice.
had in quite a while. I think I'm trying to look for the temperature. Last I saw it, it's currently 75 degrees out here down here in Mississippi. For a New Yorker like myself, in the middle of end of February, it's 75 degrees. I'm kind of in a little bit of shock today, but this is turning out to be a pretty good day.
Nice.
So I'm sure if Renee heard that, he's probably going to be very angry because I know he up in Connecticut right now is very cold. So
Yeah, for those listening, he's the director of the Carolina Esports Hub, and so yeah, absolutely. In Connecticut, not as nice. Luckily, we're here in North Carolina, so we can say the same. It's up to like 75, so we're hanging out. We're having a good time down here. It's a short weather in February. It doesn't happen often, so we definitely enjoy that for sure. But let's talk a little bit about your program, right? Because you took over for this program last year, right? And so we've seen a lot of progress since then. But talk a little bit about the program as a whole, Ole Miss Esports.
yeah, sure. So basically, I guess the full story about Ole Miss Esports, we started roughly around 2016 and early 2017, and as a primarily a first-person shooting organization, video game team, and organization. You guys probably know us from Call of Duty. We had a very successful string of competition events during that time period, and the popularity continued to grow on this campus. We had a couple major events here on campus that kind of spurred this development of me coming onto the program. Specifically, we do an event every year called the Egg Bowl. Um, for those of you not familiar with SEC lore and SEC sort of experiences, the Egg Bowl is the rivalry game most notable in football between Mississippi State and Ole Miss. We took that experience of that rivalry and we brought it to esports, and we host a land event every year, either at Mississippi State or Ole Miss, to be, figure out which one of us is the better program. And basically, through that, we were able to attract a lot of attention through the university as well as with alumni and all of that. And it sort of sort of grew from that small group of players into a major organization. And we were able to
Wow.
get a very sizable and very generous donation from one of our great alumni at Payne. To sort of start this program and really to try and put us on the map. And I think he's done a great job, and we've done a great job at doing that. And then even through COVID, we were hosting a ton of events, and I think that's one of the cool things that made this university so unique for me in the opportunity of the job search while I was searching for a job, was because the university was still hosting events. So we did stuff like major events in over the break of like Land Shark. Which is was like a regional southeast regional tournament with I think over 40 different colleges attending online. And then this past August, or I was hired here as the first director of esports programs. And since then, we've kind of been taking that mantle and taking that position and really growing the program through our successes. Whether it be academically, hosting events, or competitively.
Love that. First of all, love a good rivalry. 100%. So winning the Egg Bowl had to feel pretty special to you. And all those events happening, obviously COVID wasn't a very easy time, but for those pushing through, I think obviously y'all have done a good job since you took over last August, and you haven't looked back. So I mean, props to you guys for doing that. What's it like? Right, as a leader of this program, I know you talked a little bit about having a good time with those events, but what are some of like the core values that you like to kind of throw into the organization and really have the players live by?
Yeah, no, I think obviously, I think for me coming through any esports program or any program at all, I was actually in college, I was a football player.
All right.
So I live a lot by like those sort of values that were instilled with me through my coaches, and I try to instill that through to our players and students. So academics first, I think, is incredibly important here. Even though I know this term is sometimes looked down upon and there's a lot of fighting for it, student athlete, right?
Hmm.
And the athlete specifically in esports. But the first thing is the most important thing, which is student, right? You're a student
Yep.
first, and then you become an athlete or a competitor second. So we try and keep our grades up. We try to make sure that you guys are our players are having the ability to take the next step in their careers, whatever it is. So they're earning their degrees, they're getting their internships, they're getting their jobs out of college, and they're preparing themselves for whatever career it is, whether it be a professional career or a personal, like, business degree, getting a bachelor's in business, getting a bachelor's in science, whatever they're really doing to make sure that they're prepared for those next steps. In terms of other sort of key values we really hold, or I try to hold through, is like, supporting each other and trying to be there to pick each other up. I think one of the cool things for a program of our size, which is nearly slightly over 300 students, all encompassing, like reducing the toxicity, and we try and build a
Yep.
family, like a family sort of community here, right? You have 300 students that are part of this on our campus. So, there at times, like, you'll be in a program and you may not know someone, just because of how it is, right? Especially if you're coming in and you're new to the school. But we do a good job in making sure everyone feels welcome in that family atmosphere, and we're all here to support each other for our one common our common goals. And then last but not least, obviously, is competition. For us, it's about building up players and building up that self-esteem to have them to be able to compete at the highest level, right? I think statistically, I think it's something like 96% of all college athletes or college participants will not make the next step into a pro or an amateur level scene.
Wow.
So that with that in mind, like, a lot of there has to be a lot of other things that are being developed in college, because you're not necessarily just here to play sports and then that's going to be your next career step. So the self-esteem of that you feel confident in doing something correctly, I think is incredibly important as well.
I'm with you, and that statistic definitely hits. There's limited spots, right, at the pro level with the league circuits. No matter if a title typically has one professional, but a lot of the professional leagues themselves have different tiers, like down to challengers, so on and so forth. When we talk about the circuits, like Valorant, for example, so there are spots available still to challenge into the pro level, but they're still super limited. So I think I definitely agree with you there. That percentage doesn't lie, right? Numbers don't lie. So I think that is important to understand. The one thing I would say though is, obviously you can also pursue as a student and have that first, right? And make sure that's a priority, and also pursue your pro career too. Like, you don't have to give it up one for another, but definitely
Mhm.
keeping your priorities in check is something that I would definitely like to mention there, to kind of
Yeah,
add on to what you're saying.
yeah, no, I agree 100%. I think it's important, obviously, especially for universities like us, that it is, a great thing. Like, Ole Miss, right? SEC country.
Yep.
We do a great job here at the university of preparing people to go professional in whatever sport or competition they're involved in. So, I think in general, like, even I think in some cases, really, it helps, right, to go to a college like this and go to college and stuff like that, if they have the proper abilities to brand and to, sort of help you with that development of marketplace. Because at the end of the day, this is just one step of many, right? You could be the best player in the world, right? And if you have no brand whatsoever, or if you're, a toxic brand or a bad brand, and no one wants to come near you, you're not going to get a chance in pro. So I think we like the goal is to do a good job in that, and sort of developing those stories and developing those abilities to market yourself and all of that through a time when, like, there's a lot of upheaval right now in esports. I think we see it all the time, right? There was,
Yep.
like, what, all of the, you were talking about Valorant, all of the guard just got laid off or
Hmm.
something along those nations. Immortals just had major layoffs, 100 Thieves, but esports here in collegiates continue to grow and sort of adjust, and we offer a lot of those same sort of abilities of career building that you would see in the professional ladders and ranks.
Didn't have this down on my notes, but I did want to kind of bring this up now that you mentioned it. Does this mean, or does this call for, in your opinion, a turning for professional teams to kind of model off of what traditional sports has done in your eyes? Do you think this is going to be like a strive for the collegiate to pro type status, with franchising things like that, or do you think maybe that's like a step too far?
So what I like, obviously, this we could have like a whole podcast, a 30-minute discussion on this alone.
Sure. Yeah, we'll keep it brief.
So feel free to cut me off whenever you get bored of this conversation. But I think obviously a
Yep.
lot of what goes on in the pathway to pro here is the issue is right now in North America specifically, as we talk about this, is that our companies, our companies, our young men and women, everyone is not necessarily aligned to the normal processes that we do in esports here. In esports, we have what's called like a club way, a club or nationalistic pathway to pro, right? So,
Yep.
as a young student or a young player, you start to show skill, so you get signed to a small club. Then at that small club, you do well, you get bumped up to the next slightly bigger club, and so on and so forth. And that's something that's pretty unique, which is unique for us because in traditional athletics, because we don't usually do that in America, right? America, we have our pathway to pro for most traditional sports tied into traditional athletics, traditional educational systems, right? So you're on a middle school team, then you're on maybe a local high school, a local town team. Then you're on a high school team. Then in high school you get recruited, and then you go to college, and then in college you're on a college team, and then you're on a professional team, right? There are certain obviously teams that are a little bit different and a little bit varies, right? In the NHL and hockey, they have a nationalistic model where you're playing on the nationals team for the most part of it, but even then you have the opportunity to go back into that collegiate one. And same with like soccer, I believe, as well. I'm not as familiar with North American pathway to pro in soccer, but it's very similar to that. But as I said, in esports, it's a club thing, and unfortunately, what I feel is until we're going to continue to have these issues in the way the pathway to pro and these establishments of these professional teams and amateur teams just constantly folding and rotating and all of that, until either the games development companies step in and support these teams, or just support these organizations that are the amateur ones, the smaller ones that are constantly folding, or the games developers step in and sort of say, no, we're going to start directing our model to college and to these pathway to pro, because we think this is the way to create the most sustainability, is tying our game to the educational system.
Is that the is that direction that you would like to go? Or do you
Yes.
prefer the okay? Gotcha.
So I personally think that's the key for most success of any sport within that, is tying it in with high school and sort of buying in and building that support. I think there are models that that pathway like an amateur or club level development of pathway to pro could go, that are unique. So the one that and again, I have a little bit of background about me because we never got into it.
Yeah.
I have a master's in sports management. So this is like, when we're talking about this is like a lot. Like I've done a lot of studies on this. I've been in like my master's degree at St. John's. We did a great job working with the UEFA. So I know a lot about European soccer and their development of pathways to professional. So I have a lot of experience talking about this. So one way that I think, if we're talking about solving the pathway to pro, and we're wanting to go with this club model or nationalistic model, the best way to do that, understandably, I would say, is that you would have to tie in basically into contracts with your amateur players and your professional players, an incentive for those smaller teams to basically develop those players and then to go in. So what I mean by that, and I'm taking this from, I believe it's Romania. Romania does this with their professional clubs. So the way it worked is that you have a player, let's just say John Smith, right? John Smith is, coming into the club at 16, 17 years old. He plays for 2 years. His contract's, a pretty poor one, right? Like $400 a month, so on and so forth, whatever it is, right?
Sure.
It's a part-time job for him.
Starting point. Yeah.
That club develops him to the point where now he's getting picked up by, and I'm going to use like a League of Legends team, for example, gets picked up by Native, gets picked by AoE, Wildcard, whoever it is, right? And now he's on a bigger contract. Well, the way it works in Romania is that when that contract gets picked up and that player gets sort of announced and sort of signs that contract, there's an additional incentive. I think it's like 10% to 15% of that contract that then is given back to the smaller club. And that continues all the way up to, the professional ladders, and to the point, I believe, even where within UEFA, if a Romanian player, if I remember correctly from the case study, this was back in like 2016, if a Romanian player is signed to like the Premier League, that contract of 10% is given, that contract, whatever is signed, 10% of that is then given to the club organization to then continue sort of developing their status. And that's how you would build a stronger ecosystem, I think, in all of esports, because a lot of what the issue is now is just general stability. right? You have players who are playing at high levels that are then moving on to higher levels, and these teams are not left with anything to really show besides, oh yeah, we developed, developed like, I'm trying to think of like Doxa or someone
Sure.
like that, right? But if they had the money, right? And now again, this comes into is like, how are these owners of these smaller organizations going to necessarily spend this money? And this is when we're talking about responsibly vetting these organizations, which I think is something again we don't do too well with. Um,
Agreed.
can they then refunnel that money into developing a new player, and then can that start the cycle over again? And that's how you would make a successful organization on an amateur pathway if you didn't want to use the collegiate system.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's a lot simpler, I think, to use a collegiate or educational system pathway to pro than having to get 100 amateur organizations, and 20 of them are like out of a parent's the person's basement and or garage, being on the same level and same page to do that and get to work together for that development.
Yeah, I agreed with you. A lot of that's definitely on point there, and obviously you have a master in basically a master's in that world, right? Altogether. So a lot of good points brought up. I think one of the challenges with that, well, it's differences. I wouldn't call it a challenge per se, but a lot of these 14, 15-year-olds are. The thing about esports is there's no physical demands, right? So these 14, 15-year-olds can be better than those who are waiting right through college, and then maybe they lose interest in that sense. Could be an argument against to some degree. Well, how would you counteract that statement?
I mean, I think obviously there's cases and case studies for all of that, like in terms and back and forth. I mean, especially when we're talking about like, just biologically the body's developed differently and all of that, right? So like if we're talking about a game, a physically demanding game like football, you don't want a, 16, 17, 18-year old necessarily in the NFL going up against 25, 27, 28-year olds,
Right.
because just physically they're not on the same level of build out. But like, in basketball, you see it all the time. In basketball and soccer, and even like I think I've seen it in hockey now, right? There's a huge swing in younger players coming into NHL and being really successful. So I think obviously in terms of that demand and stuff, in terms of that, it has been changing. And obviously, as we get better with understanding what the demands on the body are in terms of esports, whether it be eye rest, back core, sort of muscular stuff, wrist injury prevention, things of that nature, it'll get better. But I think right now, I think obviously for those type of students, those high level players and stuff like that, is really doing what they do best, and then also to realize that the pro scene doesn't last forever. I think just like, I mean, maybe you have the statistics available. I've never done it for esports, but I think like the average pro career in any traditional athletic sport is like 2 years or something like that, 2 to 3 years. And basically, like if a person turns pro at 15 in esports, and that track is staying true, which I wouldn't be surprised it's smaller, because what is the definition of a pro? Are we talking signing to the like the S tier franchise competition, or are we talking about signing to academy amateur level play?
Yeah.
It could be less, it could be longer, but at the end of the day, you need to still develop those life skills to sort of to
There you go.
prepare yourself for the next spot in life. And I think that's what college does a really good job at, and the educational pathway to pro does a good job at.
100% well spoken. That collegiate presence in it all ties back to what you said, student athletes, right? And I agree with you there. I think to have that focus first goes back to your number as well, up to towards 95%, right? They're not going to make it that far, right? And to have that plan set up, and it might have been higher than that. I forget what the actual number is, but the point is, I think it's great. I think the collegiate scene definitely helps in that regards too, and you can still get really high level competition collegiately. Number one, number two, there's places out there like Stay Plugged In as well that do the travel type style, right, where you have these high school students looking for their next collegiate space, and so Stay Plugged In comes in and kind of fills that role too in that structure that you're talking about too. And I know that you guys have actually joined forces with Stay Plugged In, and you're going to host an event together on your campus. That's pretty exciting, right? That's going to be April 15th through the 16th. So talk a little bit about this event going down, this esports high school recruiting LAN.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've always wanted to work with Stay Plugged In. At my last job, actually, up in New York, I was in the process of setting up a Stay Plugged In recruiting event there. Unfortunately, or not unfortunately, but unfortunately for that process, I ended up having to I took this job and left. So it was
Sure.
one of my main goals was to work with Stay Plugged In at some point, especially for, this area specifically, because I think it's a great way to get eyes on the college development and the opportunities that these high school students will have if they continue to follow their passions and dreams in video games. Um, so the event itself is April 15th and 16th, which just so happens to coincide with our Mississippi Day and our Junior Preview Day, which is going to
Oh
be a great
man,
opportunity. Yeah, it's going to be a
nice.
great opportunity to come on campus. The campus is going to be alive with high school students, and you're going to get to learn a ton about the university and what we do here, and then a ton about the campus life. There'll be a ton of events going on, not just Old Miss, just not this spin recruiting event. There's actually going to be, I believe, our spring football game is going to be that day. So there's going to be a ton of
Wow.
opportunities and other things to go on
Yeah.
campus if you want to get that true SEC feel and true major college feel. I always think is going to be great. The event itself is going to be. I haven't officially cleared this and told Spin, so this is you're hearing stuff in the announcement. So this is going to be it's going to be in one of our Division One, SEC level facilities here on the campus. It's going to be partake in three different games. So that's going to be Valorant, Super Smash Brothers, and Rocket League. We are in the process of working out additional games that will be played in additional free areas. We're going to have the esports facility open here as well. So if you want to learn about other parts of the campus and other parts of our program, we're going to have people able there to talk. Um, we potentially will be having matches for ourselves that day, those weekends as well, that you'll be able to spectate with our players, and we're trying to set up a great time for everyone involved to really get an idea of what Mississippi is and what Ole Miss is.
That's incredible. I don't think there's been a true opportunity like this out towards Ole Miss, especially for esports students. Because let's be real, the Stay Plugged In website is awesome. You can message college directors, right, and you can talk to them on the website itself. But to be in person, live, talking to the esports director of Ole Miss, aka John McDermott, we have here with us right now, being able to chat and feel the student life and say, hey, is this a location that I would like to be on, right? Because online you can figure out what studies do I like. Cool, you all have that. That's awesome, right? Do you have Rocket League? Yes, check, right? Check, check. It's rare that you get the full experience, and to have it that weekend with the football game going on, right? And the student life going to be active as ever. I think that's just a great opportunity, and it can't miss. But outside of that, those events happening during the weekends, let's say it's just a regular Thursday or Friday. Where are some of the places that these students can go eat, hang out, things like that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think obviously it's some of the this area is coming as a northerner, right? This area is so completely unique in terms of what we can do because it's such a different experience and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
I would say the first thing I would say is obviously we have like in terms of places to eat, I would say I guess like some of the best barbecue in the world in terms of down here in Mississippi. There's a ton of different places. So I passed like four coming in, which is only like from my house, which is only about a 20-minute drive. I passed like four barbecue places that are
Oh
all
man.
very good. So you have that. I think this time of year right now, the big season that just started is crawfish, which was something I've never experienced. And some of the most fresh and like tasty seafood that I've ever had coming from just like transporting like from Louisiana up to us. In terms of things we can do on campus and stuff like that, there are a ton of things as well. So um, our campus is sprawling. It's over 300. I think it's over
Okay.
3,300 acres. It's its own separate town here in the state of Mississippi.
Wow.
So we have a ton of things. The esports facility here on campus is actually right outside the Grove, which has been consistently voted for the past 5 years, I believe the past 5 years, the number one tailgating spot for all of football in the NCAA and all of tailgating in
Nice.
general for college. So there's a ton of that type of events going on here. We have like the historical square where there's a ton of small stores and more great food and more great opportunities. We have the Ford Theater here, which does plays and comedians and sort of theater and nightlife in that sort of sense. And then we actually are right across the street from a movie theater as well. So you'd be able to catch a movie here. You'd be able to kind of do everything you ever want here. And there's obviously always then the general, right, college sort of experiences. We have 2 gyms on campus. We have a rock climbing a wall, an two Olympic sized pools, I think, basketball courts all across the place, tennis courts, whatever you really want, you name it. I think that's the coolest thing about being on this campus is that we have it.
That's wild. Quite literally its own land. Seeing as it's called University of Mississippi, is that right?
Yeah. So that's the actual town itself. So
that's
when I say that,
you quite mean it, 100%.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. And again, if you want to sign up for this event, it's a Stay Plugged In recruiting series, campus series rather. And that's going to happen April 15th and 16th. Go to staypluggedin.gg/events and sign up now. John, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
No problem. Thank you so much. I look forward to having you guys here, and I hope to see you all soon.
Will do. Pleasure.